Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Very exciting today. We're going to read the Ten Commandments, but it's not what I'm going to talk about today. I actually spoke a little bit about the Ten Commandments last night. We had a great conversation at services last night about whether we thought that the commandment of Shabbat, observing the Shabbat, ranked high enough to be with all the rest of the commandments. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, all those sorts of things, these morally powerful things. Why is it that, a day of rest ranks above that? And we had a great conversation, a great argument that perhaps it's not just about a day of rest, but there is a moral value to Shabbat as well. But today, I actually want to talk about the beginning of the Parsha, where we're going to begin today, because it's not troubling, but it is troubling. So let's read it. We're going to start on page 1005. 1005. The voice of Deuteronomy is whom? Moses, right? This is Moses. This is Moses' telling or retelling of what has happened over these last 40 years. And Parasha Va'etkhanan, which is what we're reading today, starts with that word, Va'etkhanan. I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you who let your servant see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hand, you whose powerful deeds no God in heaven or on earth can equal, let me, I pray, cross over and see the good land on the other side of Jordan, that good hill country and the Lebanon. But the Lord was wrathful with me on your account and would not listen to me. The Lord said, enough, never speak to me of this matter again. Let's stop there for a moment. So, what are we talking about here? What's the context of this conversation? Judy. Moses is not allowed to go into the land. Why?
Because he broke the first set of tablets. He also pounded on the rock.
Okay, so there's a couple of different answers. Why is not so easy with this? So Judy gave two different answers. One is that he broke the first set of tablets, which God wasn't so thrilled about that. But the direct correlation to the punishment of not going into the land was he hit the rock instead of speaking to it when it came time for water. Milt. Twice.
There's irony in that he says, you've shown us your great works and the wonders you can do, but he didn't trust God to
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of irony in all of this. You do all these great wonders. Well, the reason I'm in this pickle is because I didn't believe enough, right? I didn't trust enough in God's wonders, and I got angry and I hit the rock. I've actually given a sermon. I wrote a paper when I was in rabbinical school about what the actual sin was of Moses. And I argued, you've heard me talk about this before, I've argued that it was actually, he didn't trust enough in God, and he actually performed a magic rite, right? He tried forcing God's hand in the way that he did it, and I wrote a paper sort of proving all of that, and that's why he was punished. Marge.
We actually know that he didn't trust God because when you're angry from a cortex.
Yeah, thank you, right? We don't know for sure that he didn't trust God, but when you're angry, you're not necessarily thinking clearly, you're not necessarily thinking things through, and maybe the reaction wasn't a lack of trust, but was a lack of control of one's own anger. Possible. Michal.
I'm thinking of it in another way, that also he is definitely kind of like a parent. Sometimes if they lose their cool and they hit their child and they say to
Yeah.
He's talking to the children of
There's definitely an offset of blame here, right? We see that. But the Lord was wrathful with me on your account. It's your fault, people, that I lost my temper. Now, he's not wrong, right? The people were being quite difficult at the time. They were kvetching, and they were kvetching, and they were kvetching. And, you know, we've seen it. We've been there where parents have sort of, you know, when a kid is going, mom, 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 and you're just like, ah, right? So I get it, but he's still, I think you're right, Michal, he's saying you're to blame for this. He's not actually taking the blame for this or the ownership.
See, I don't agree with that because you can stop something up here. It's how you take it in. You know, nobody can make you feel something. You feel it because how you take it in.
Right,
Which is what we do when we're working with people who have violent issues. We teach them to be able to stop here.
right.
So again, you're on your frontal cortex, so you have to learn to stay in your frontal cortex. If you have anger issues.
Okay, well, by the way, I mean, Moses, this was really Moses' first time with these anger issues, right? I mean, you know, he got a little frustrated, but Moses was not an angry person in the beginning.
It's still
In that moment, he lost his cool, for sure.
but you can't blame other people.
But he does.
He had a little incident in Egypt also that he lost his anger,
Yeah,
lost his temper.
yeah, he does. Now, by the way, one could argue that there's also moments in our history in the book of Exodus where God loses God's cool and Moses is the one that pulls him back. Right? So, but here clearly, right? So we've got Moses saying Va'etkhanan, right? He is actually acknowledging that he is pleading with God. It is a very strong word. It's a very, very strong word. So much so that they named the Parsha Va'etkhanan, right? It comes from the word, the root chet nun nun, which is, right, chanun, rachum v'chanun. It's mercy. I begged for mercy, right? I pleaded for mercy. It's also a very strange grammatical construction, right? It's the etpa'el or hitpa'el, right, in the biblical format, which in modern Hebrew, not always in the case of the Bible, but in modern Hebrew, it is reflexive, right? Which creates all sorts of interesting connotations for this. What do I mean by reflexive? Lilbosh means to dress, right? Lehitlabesh means to dress yourself. So it's an action that is now brought back on yourself, which is why, by the way, lehitpalel, to pray, is a reflexive action in Hebrew, right? We bring it back on ourselves. So Va'etkhanan is an interesting grammatical framework here of I'm pleading with you, but it's reflexive on myself in some sort of way. It's hard to understand that. But let's talk a little bit about God's response here, or at least Moses' perception of God's response, because God wasn't quite so harsh as Moses is describing God here. What does Moses say God does? Enough, right? Enough.
Well, first he says, God, he wouldn't listen to me. But I think he did listen. He wouldn't grant him his wish.
Right. So he
listened.
yeah,
He said no.
he listened. He said no, but he wouldn't grant what it is that he wanted. But the Hebrew here is rav lach, right? It's enough for you. It's enough for you. Don't add to this anymore. Don't say anything else. Let's unpack that a little bit. What's going on here?
I think, we're looking at this, not we, but one could look at this like it's this combative thing with the child. Please, let me go. point, they've been 40 years, they've been through a lot, they fought wars, some they lost, some they didn't. They've had plagues, some of them made it, some of them didn't. At this point, we know the whole slave mentality. We've talked about this over the years, and they had to appoint succession. Like, that was really important. But I think maybe he's saying, maybe there's some compassion in this that we're missing. We're just like, you know what? You've worked enough. You've done a lot. You've gotten us this far. Now, go up,
Yeah.
look around to the, you've got this panoramic view. Check it out.
Yeah. So Diana's arguing here. Yeah.
It's like a retirement party.
Diana's arguing here, which is interesting. We're going to see one of the midrashim that I'm going to bring today is going to echo this. Diana's arguing here that maybe this isn't a harsh sort of thing. Maybe we're reading it harsh, but maybe it's like, it's enough, Moses. You're good. Maybe the tone here, because we don't see the tone, right? It's like a text. It's like a text, right? Or an email. You don't hear the tone. Maybe the tone here is not, it's enough, don't ever speak to me of this again, but it's enough. You don't have to worry about this anymore. Right? Could be either one. Ooh, lots of hands went up on that. I'm going to come around. Go ahead.
We have another word for enough, though.
Yeah, but die is a modern Hebrew word. We don't really see it as much in the Bible. We see it in the rabbinic period with dayenu, right? Right? But you don't see the word die in the Bible as much. It's a more modern kind of understanding, or more modern word. So they wouldn't have used the word die probably back here.
But he is saying literally, there's a lot for you or to you, and it could be in the world to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Rav lach, right? Rav lach means it's enough for you. Right? Now it could be negatively, it's enough, which is how this translation is reading it, but it could also be, you're okay, it's enough. And we're going to see one of the midrashim picks up on that. Michal, it'll come around.
Thinking that God is changing the guard. He's taking the old man and he's putting the younger, very brave man in his place.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's some kind of rahmanut to all the Israelis, the Jews who didn't make it.
Yeah.
So Moses is a part of that group too.
Mm-hmm.
He's from them. He's of them. So,
Right. I mean, we know there are only two people who get to go into the land of Israel from the old guard. Moses isn't one of them. It's Joshua and Caleb, right? Those are the only two that go in. Everyone else has passed away in the desert. Marge and or Hillary, you guys can decide which one wants to go first. Go ahead.
But even if you said interpretation, which makes a lot of sense, it's still denying Moses' feelings.
100%. Well, it's not denying his feelings, it's denying his request.
But he's denying but in that request, he's feeling this major loss.
Yes. But, yes, no, I agree with you. Marge is arguing, for those who are playing our home game and can't hear, Marge is arguing that it's still a major loss, but the tone of this matters. Because if God's tone is, don't ever talk to me about this again, I agree with you. That is denying the loss. But if it's look, I understand where you're coming from, don't worry. You disagree? Go ahead.
Because you can't tell someone else how to feel.
Okay.
Or God, even God.
Well, I don't think he's telling him how to feel.
No, he's telling you how to.
He's telling him, stop talking about this.
Well, he's also saying, stop going with your feeling. Don't keep pushing me about your feeling of blindness.
No, those are two things. You can be angry. I mean, I say that to my kids all the time, right? You can be angry with me, you still can't do it. But go ahead, be angry.
I don't want to belabor it again, but there's no saying, I understand your pain. But I'd like you to think about
Yeah, I mean, there's no clear as we call, and you do it in your field as a negotiator, I do it in my field. There's no emotional labeling here, right? We're not calling out what the emotion is. I agree with that. Hillary.
I could comment about that, but I have a different comment. So the comment about that is look at Moses' interpretation of what God said. And that doesn't necessarily mean that God didn't say it in a more kind language.
Yeah, that is true. Right? We are hearing this through Moses' lens, through Moses' filters. So if we go back actually and look at the actual, it's not nearly as harsh. Okay.
That there's a part of Moses believing he's being punished for having gotten angry. And here he's seeing God giving him anger to explain the punishment, which doesn't seem, there's like a bit of irony in it, or, a bit of incongruity in it for Moses, from Moses' perspective.
Yeah.
You're mad I got angry, and now you're mad at me.
Again, I think I agree with you. I think my response to that Moses, Moses was punished for getting angry, and we're seeing anger in God here. We could argue here that, again, this is Moses' reflection, Moses' recollection of what happened, as opposed to what actually happened. Judy, and then I'll actually bring a couple of midrashim to see how the rabbis deal with this.
I was thinking along the lines of what Michal said. I was sitting here thinking that what if Moses had been allowed to go through? It was time for new leadership. A new leader had been chosen. Would there have been a split in the people? Who do we follow? Who do we listen to?
Yeah.
Moses or Joshua?
Yeah, look, it is always difficult when you have a transition of leadership, right? It is always difficult, and it takes some time. And the cleaner the break, the easier it is for a community to understand, what it is. The Reform movement actually does this very, very well. When there is a change of rabbis, right? Even if the rabbi becomes rabbi emeritus, right? And then a new rabbi comes in, the old rabbi is not allowed to come to that synagogue for a year. To give the new rabbi an opportunity to establish themselves. Because anytime they're upset, somebody's upset, and the old rabbi comes in, everybody's going to start complaining. Wow, this new rabbi, they don't do it like you do. Can you do something about it, right? And it undermines the person. And so the Reform movement actually requires that the old rabbi who is leaving isn't there as part of the community for a year. Then you can come back and all of that. But to give the new leader an opportunity to establish themselves, there's something powerful about that. Okay, there are 3 different midrashim that I kind of want to highlight in terms of how the rabbis are understanding this. The first comes from Devarim Rabbah, and it is the pleading part of it and how Moses is pleading. And what the Midrash does is Moses said to God, Master of the worlds, if I deserve judgment, then give me judgment from your side of justice. And if I do not deserve judgment, then give me compassion from your side of compassion. As you gave Abraham when he said, what can you give me, right? So there is some tension in early on with Abraham, and God showed mercy to Abraham. And we see the rabbis are saying here that Moses is kind of like, well, you gave Abraham mercy, right? You kind of let him off the hook a little bit. That's the pleading part in this, right? Why they use the word pleading. And the Midrash then brings that harsher tone of God that we see in the text and puts words in God's mouth and says, God said to Moses, don't be arrogant in front of me. You compare yourself to Abraham? Right? So you see, the Midrash is trying to explain some of the tone that we get here in Moses' retelling of all of this. And the Midrash is highlighting the pleading tone, but also highlighting the harshness. That Moshe pushed the line a little bit too much, and he's saying, you're comparing to Abraham? Now, the Midrash then goes on and says, Well, yeah, certainly Abraham was great, but Moshe was Moshe. And still, that push is there. So that's the first midrash. The second midrash that we have here is the word enough, right? Enough. Why does God say enough to Moses? Rather, thus is what Moses said, Master of the world, if you won't let me enter into the land of Israel, then at least turn me into a beast of the field. They eat grass and drink water. They live and they see the world and sing a song before their Creator. Let my soul be amongst them. And God said to Moses, enough. Then Moses said, Master of the world, if you won't let me enter as a person nor as a beast of the field, then turn me into a bird. And we get this conversation where Moses is pushing God. Well, if you don't do this, then do this. And that's why, according to the Midrash, we hear this enough. This enough. At least one explanation. The last explanation is the one that Diana leaned into. And let me summarize it instead of reading through it. It basically, the words Rav Lach, it's enough for you, were actually not said in anger, but Moshe was making the argument in this midrash of there are mitzvot that you have given to the people of Israel that I will never be able to do. Because some of the mitzvot can only be done in the land of Israel. Therefore, I will never have the opportunity to do all 613 mitzvot. I will never get the reward that other people can get, right? And he was concerned about himself. He was concerned about his ability to fulfill mitzvot. And the response that God had was, you've done enough. It's okay. You've done more than anyone could have ever done. What you have fulfilled has given you merit greater than any other human being, the Midrash says. You don't need to worry about this anymore. You don't need to bring this up again because you're going to be fine. Right? So 3 different Midrashim trying to make some sense of the tone. But let's go back and let's end where we started and remember that this is Moses. And Moses is still clearly carrying some angst over this. There's no doubt. The way that he is talking to the people, whether it's he's blaming them for what it is, whether it's he's using this term, I pleaded with God and God ignored me, whether it's bringing this harsher tone of God's words, Moses is clearly torn up over this. And the question that I want to leave us with is, so what's the lesson for us? What do we walk away from reading this today? And ironically, reading this on, or maybe not ironically, intentionally, reading this on Shabbat Nachamu, right? This is the Shabbat where we're going to read the Haftarah, the first Haftarah of consolation. The first Haftarah of consolation after Tisha B'Av, after the destruction of the Jewish world, right? We're starting to come out of that, coming back towards High Holy Days, back towards Rosh Hashanah. What do we make of this? Marge? That we're made in God's image, Marge says, and we can make the same mistakes. We can be too harsh too. Absolutely.
I think it's about a certain amount of presentation, how we present ourselves and how we're perceived. Even like we're having this conversation here. Well, was he angry? Was he not angry? All we have are divarim, words. And we have to interpret them. And it's how we interpret and others do. And right now on social media, it's bad enough that there is so much sinat chinam, baseless hatred going on. And then
It's enough, right?
It's enough already. It's like, we get it. We know that you guys don't like each other, you're not respecting each other, but we really need a little bit of Va'etkhanan here to try to at least unify who we have. We're not so big in number. Like, this is in Torah, like, you're small in number, but you're mighty. Are
Right.
we really? I don't know if we're so divided. And I think that's really important to lean into that. Like, when is it to know when to say,
It's
well,
enough. Yeah.
and one of the things that I recently gave a speech at Toastmasters, sorry, I'm having this, am I trying to be right or am I trying to solve a problem?
Mm.
And it doesn't matter if I'm right or not right. There's a problem here. They have to figure out how to now cross over, take all these mitzvot, and now say, oh, it was halachah l'Moshe Sinai. It was given to God.
All right, so yeah, I want to go back. I want to go back to what you were saying before. Of one of the things we can take from this is learning when to be able to say Ravlach, like it's enough. It's enough. We've accomplished enough. We've seen enough. We can be satisfied with what we have. I mean, that's part of the argument of what Shabbat is supposed to do for us, right? 6 days of the week we are working, we're growing, we're building, we're trying to get more. That's what we human beings do. And Judaism is not opposed to that, right? Judaism is not opposed to ambition, and Judaism is not opposed to going out and building the world and making money and all those sorts of things. There's nothing wrong with that. But we balance that with the ability at least once a week to say it's enough. Let's just take a break. Let's recognize the gifts we have before going out and deciding what we really need and what we really don't need. And to some degree, even though Moses wanted to go into the land of Israel, God said, that's not actually what the people need, and that's not ultimately what you need, even though that may be what you want. Yes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that it's a little bit about being content, and then also if Moses isn't content, imagine the impact that has on the other people and how that might make them feel.
Mm-hmm.
How we might reflect on God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about being content, and if Moses isn't content, then how does that reflect on other people and reflect on God? Yes.
Almost think it's kind of like glass half empty or glass half full. And hoping about reward and punishment, what we see might not be what's really there. And there's different ways of looking at the same outcome.
Yeah.
And what you choose.
There's a certain amount of personal perspective, right? There's a certain amount of how do we see it? How do we see the world? We have people that have a lot more than, a vast majority of the population, and they're not necessarily happy people. And we have people that don't have very much, and they're very happy people. Doesn't necessarily mean, right? It's about how we see what we have and how we see the way that we're living our lives. Yes, sir.
I just offer something to say, like, that I can speak to myself and say, I'm enough.
Yeah.
I don't need to be someone else. I can be me, and I'm enough, and I'm fine. Having gone through some personal life, like, deconstruction of myself just recently, to come back and say, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay where I am, and slowly I can rebuild, just like you said, we're building back up to the high holidays, to give ourselves some grace.
Yeah.
Deconstruction, say, I'm enough as I am, and I can slowly do this, and I can treat myself kindly.
I like that, right? Hearing that, maybe God was trying to express that to Moses, so Moses ultimately will learn to say, I'm enough. I've done enough. And by the way, if Moses didn't do enough, who of us is going to be able to do that? I mean, come on, right? Anybody else before we end? I want to tie this into Shabbat Nachamu. We want to get to the Nachamu part so quickly in our lives. We want to get to the comfort and the consolation. And the reality is that challenging times in our life, while certainly can be traumatic in some ways, don't always have to be, right? When we hit a problem in our life, obviously there are things that are traumatic, but when we hit a problem, we hit a challenge, when we hit something in our life, how we deal with that, how we deal with the fact that, it doesn't matter how much I want to, I am not going to be a professional athlete. Right? Doesn't matter. And it really doesn't matter how much I train. I could leave the rabbinate. I could train every single day. I am not going to be a professional athlete. Okay. How do I deal with that? Is that a trauma? No. It's a reality in my life that I have to say, I'm not going to get everything that I may want. Right? As a great musician once said, you can't always get what you want. Right? And so in this Shabbat of Nachamu, in the Shabbat where we are looking for consolation, we remind ourselves that to some degree consolation comes not externally but internally. It starts internally. We can console somebody. But you know what? No matter what you say, you're not going to take away the pain if you're on the outside of somebody who's lost a loved one. You're not. That's going to be a process that they're going to have to deal with, consoling themselves, finding a way to not probably ever get rid of that pain, but be able to say, you know what? I wish I would have had more time with this person, but wow, the time I had, that was amazing. Ravlach. It may not have been enough, that's not the right word, but it was amazing. It's an interesting way to think about consolation. It's an interesting way to think about how we look at the world as we come together on this Shabbat Nachamu. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.